I'm DJ Diya Anantharaman, radio host of Unearthly Machine and music director at KUCR Riverside 88.3 FM, and I'm here with Tyler Holmes. The album Patience was released in September via Ratskin Records. We've convened today to chat. Good afternoon, Tyler. It's so lovely to see you. How are you doing on this beautiful November afternoon?
I'm doing great. Yeah, I'm doing great. How about you?
Great. The rain has us all in a very cozy mood over here in Southern California. So,
Yes.
we'll start from the beginning. I did some digging and learned that you've been releasing music since the 2010s, rolling out experimental soundscapes and meticulous electronic compositions. I first stumbled across your solo work upon seeing you open for Ruchika Nair and Nina Keith's project Disney Blood in LA last month, and I really enjoyed your synthesis of visual and sonic experimentation paired with a minimal and tasteful setup, which brought the music from patience to life amidst the stage fog and the darkness. Can you tell me a little bit about your musical background and how it informs your artistic philosophy to this point?
Sure. I think that kind of usually explains like why I do what I do, and it makes a little more sense, especially like especially this release. Um, I was always an artist as a kid. I as a trauma response would like draw constantly,
Hmm.
which evolved into in high school I went to like an art high school, and I was like studying classical painting where we had to learn to paint like the Dutch masters, um, which was interesting because I really wanted to be like conceptual and a freak, and they were like, "You're on a scholarship. You're black. If you want to be weird, you've got to be Chuck Close first." And it was around that time, I'm old, so it was around that time that I got a computer in the home,
Hmm.
and it had like a little computer mic. And I just started making like really weird sound collages and soundscapes and just seeing what I could do using sound and samples sort of like as sculpture. Like I would just like take really small clips of sound and arrange them. And the program that I used was Microsoft Sound Recorder. It's like very, very
Yes, from the
minimal.
90s, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was like somebody's throwaway computer that I was using. So I used that, and I made like a lot of samples and made really weird songs and made like really ornate packaging for them and would give them to my friends. And then I started like toward the end of high school, I started to be like, oh, what if I tried to make these like sound like songs, you
Hmm.
know? And it was kind of like that program is blind, like it's not a DAW, you can't see where you're putting anything. So it was a lot of like my terrible math, and I learned later, I was like, oh, all of these songs are the same BPM for the most part
Hmm.
because I'm just clipping them all the same way. Um, so yeah, that's how I got started, and
Hmm.
then eventually I started to want to make things that had like more song-like quality.
Hmm.
Um, and I've had like different iterations of the Tyler Holmes project where there are like where I have like a full band.
Hmm.
I always say that it's like an electroacoustic project because I love to play with
Yes. Hmm.
like when the show that you saw, I was playing with like my most frequent collaborator, Peekaboo, and she's a cellist, and
Yeah.
I love to play with like the Baroque girls and do
Hmm.
experimental weird stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's how I really got into fusing the stuff together.
Yeah, and that actually really brings me to one of my favorite parts of your live performance, which was the incorporation of the cello with Peekaboo playing it. I really enjoyed the marriage of manipulated acoustic and electronic elements and patience, and I think they blend very nicely with the more grainy and white noise centric elements of the project. I also noticed some more rhythmic and percussive synth forward notions, especially towards the middle of the album, which kind of sits in the uncanny valley of organic and otherworldly sound, which I'm interested in. Moreover, I'm always, fascinated in knowing how the choices were made in terms of the instrumentation, melodic and rhythmic elements of Patience. Can you tell me about your creative process on this album, along with its sonic and emotional landscapes and how they show up through some of your songwriting, vocal, and instrumental choices?
Sure. I started writing Patience like how a music project starts. You're not I mean, maybe some people set out like I'm gonna write this specific project, but it was like I went through a breakup, I started making songs. And it was pretty clear after I made one of the songs on there, Commercial Success is the first one that I made, and that's the first song that I played at the show.
Hmm.
Um, and that song, I was like, oh, this is like going into more ambient territory. And I
Hmm.
was like, I think this is sort of like the direction that I want to go in.
Hmm.
Because I've made songs, I've made stuff that to me sounds a little more poppy. I've made a
Hmm.
lot of experimental music, and um, this was around the time like I had opened up for Florist, and I
Mm.
had more of a like folksy band, and I opened for my favorite artist Grouper.
I love
Um,
Grouper. Yeah.
she's incredible,
Hmm.
and that doing these sort of like ambient things, and I was like doing some sound healing, different projects like that, and I was like, it just seemed like a more fertile territory, like to experiment, because I've been, talking about trauma for a long time now. So to explore like actually the healing part of it in the music, I think was kind of new and interesting to me. Um, so that's really how it started. And Patience is like a two-parter. The second record is called Facsimile,
Hmm.
and that has the like songs. They're like to me, I was like proposing it as like the pop album, but I was like shopping it around at first to record labels, and one was like, it's pretty deceitful to call this pop
Yeah.
because it's like there's like some experimentation with like different time signatures, and
Hmm.
the orchestration is really ornate, and there's a lot of changes, and um, just like a lot of experiments for me. And that those two pieces are like the first pieces working with like instrumentalists where I've composed every part of the music, and
Hmm.
it's not improv or open to
Hmm.
interpretation. So yeah, that was that process. I worked with my bandmate. Actually, that's sort of how we started forming our band. She like recorded some of
Yeah.
both of these records,
Josephine. Hmm.
Josephine Shetty, yeah.
Hmm.
And yeah, so that was a big project. I worked with like actually a lot of artists on
Hmm.
this next record, and at initially it was like one project, and I eventually was like, okay, this is 90 plus minutes of music. I was like, nobody's gonna listen to this in one setting. I have to split it up. So then I was like, Patience is going to be the ambient experimental noise record, and then there was a period where it was done, and I was like doing all the release stuff, and that all got pushed back. It initially was going to come out at the beginning of summer, but there was a couple hiccups, and I also, once the hiccups arose, I was like, it doesn't really make sense to me putting out this like long, languid, depressing album in the summer. I'm like, who's going to be like in their convertible in 100 degrees bumping this like ambient whir? So I was like, let's push it back to September because then it'll be kind of more the mood.
Hmm.
And when I pushed it back, then I started making new songs. I moved into this apartment. I actually live with Nina Keith,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
she has a lot of crazy instruments around. I was like, oh, let's get to work. So a lot of the stuff in the midsection of the album that you're talking about, the Uncanny Valley, that was like, I was like, okay, let's make some songs for
Yeah.
this. So I made like two or three song-like things. An Artifact, that single was like guitar initially, and I changed it because Nina has a cello, so I recorded myself making a lot of like cello loops.
Hmm.
Yeah, that was the process. It was an experiment, and then it came together with some fun add-ons at the end.
Yeah, that reminds me of my last interview I did with Chushu, and Jamie talked a little bit about switchblades being around the studio and the recording space, and that kind of reminds me a little bit about what you're talking about with the weird instruments and the cellos and just how whatever was around you kind of shaped your process. That's interesting, just a parallel. I talked a bit about the soundscapes
Love
of this
Future.
album. Yeah, no, me too. I talked a bit about the soundscapes of this album, and I think personally owning it on tape further brings out some of that texture. I think I definitely see where your idea of trapping the ghost fits in, and I feel that natural ebb and flow of the project kind of brings to mind the idea of a natural homeostasis and the idea of nature regulating its beings despite it being capable of such extreme conditions. I know you're influenced by literary works such as those of Mark Twain and Jeff Vandermeer, and moreover, I'd like to know what were some of the main inspirations for patients? And this could be other music, media, literature, film, spiritual occurrences, religious epiphanies, artistic manifestos, evocative ghosts, etc.
Wow, I love evocative ghosts. That's great. I'm stealing that from you. No, just kidding. Um, so yeah, I feel like I've like in the press release and all that stuff, it talks about the Mark Twain book, number 44, The Mysterious Stranger,
Hmm.
and um, the Southern Reach trilogy, Jeff
Yeah.
Vandermeer, and those definitely feature those concepts
Hmm.
pretty strongly of like, sort of capturing the human element, whether it's like the spirit, the soul, consciousness. So that was really interesting to me, and I sort of was like went through this period where I was ingesting all the media that I could find that's about those concepts. So there's a lot of things like the Prestige, I think, is very interesting. That has a little bit of that. There's a lot of Black Mirror that delves
Hmm.
into sort of like what happens when you put your brain or your consciousness somewhere else. Um, and I think all of this stuff just presents me with the same question over and over again, which is just so interesting to me. And I love seeing it in all of these different media, which is, what is it? What is like, I feel like there's a lot of different new theories about consciousness. Like, is consciousness like the internet and are we all on consciousness? Is
Mm.
consciousness like the cloud and we're uploading our information to it? Um, so I just love thinking about these concepts. I feel like grief and death has been such a big part of my life and a big part of my work. So I think this step of just imagining what that is really interesting to me. Even if it's nothing, even if we die and it's a black screen,
Yeah.
I'm curious about that moment that we are animated and what it is. Um, so yeah, all of that different stuff was really inspiring me. If you know any other media where that happens, please send it my way. I'm always so curious.
Yeah.
Clones, people being copied, that is so
Mhm.
interesting to me.
Yeah, that's interesting, definitely. I see some of that with the themes and song titles as well, which brings me to the album artwork for Patience. It's a captivating sculpture, and the colors and textures kind of bring to mind a creature trapped in fossilized amber. And I'd love to know the story behind that art and why it was chosen to represent this album.
It's so fun. I love that question.
Mhm.
The sculptures are made by the love of my life, Elena Martinez Bravo, and I had seen some pieces by, I think their name is Yuji Ajamaso,
Hmm.
and at what was it, at PS1 in New York, and I had seen some other sculptures that like used trash, and like you
Hmm.
were talking about before, like the like whatever instruments around. I'm really interested in that concept of availabilism, like Cindy
Hmm.
Sherman, who's like, I use myself because I'm always around.
Yeah.
Um, so I had like a really long discussion with Elena one day. We like talked on the phone for like 3 or 4 hours,
Hmm.
and I was like, "This is what I'm picturing." She has done a lot of collage work,
Hmm.
and she's done some like she's created a lot of work that I've maybe used for a cover, or like she's done a lot of interesting things with it. And going into this project that we talked about, and eventually was like we came to the consensus. I was like, oh, you should make the cover. And
Hmm.
after we had that conversation, she was like, all right, I'm gonna make things. And I think we both took one sculpture class in college, but she like hadn't really made sculptures before like that. And
Hmm.
she just did research, bought a bunch of, she made like 20 sculptures. Um, the facsimile will have two of the sculptures on the cover, and the single cover for Artifact actually features a different sculpture. It looks kind of similar, but it's a different object.
Hmm.
So yeah, that's how they came to be. There's a lot of them. They're really beautiful. They're really
Yeah.
freaky and weird. Um, yeah, I think they're like the main thing is they're meant to capture that like there is something that is like corporeal and tactile and like visceral about them, and then there is also something that's very like there's these like ink washes and things that like have this ephemeral quality that
Yeah.
is like evocative, but you can't really say what, you know?
Hmm. Yeah, it's really interesting. And it also reminds me of the
So yeah.
music video for Copy because that kind of seems, again, simultaneously earthly and alien with organic textures coupled with mystical, shiny goop, kind of reminding me of amniotic fluid. And with that in mind, my reading of it had a lot more to do with rebirth and finding one's place in a world that's kind of riddled with natural absurdity. Can you tell me a little bit more about the choice to include all these visuals in your music video and how they function in tandem with the album's themes?
So for the music video, I worked with my friend DB Amarin, and they do a lot of crazy glitchy, and when we were putting that together, the time was like kind of there was like kind of a time crunch, and the I made this music video, or we, it was like such a group project. We made this music video for my song "To Accept" that was on my last record, and we had shot like a whole series of images for that, and then we scrapped them and came up with a new concept and filmed a whole new video. So some of the footage from that we like had never used. So I sent that to DB because I was like, here's some more stuff for you to manipulate and like use to create images so it's not all from scratch in this like limited amount of time. So all of the images of me in that are from that. And there was like
Mm,
a 3D scan that I believe he used. Um, and yeah, so that other video is very much like, I don't know, kind of mimics cloning or something like that. And with copy, um, I think, yeah, similarly, it all focuses on those concepts of, you know, recreating or duplicating yourself and uh, just what like physical effects that has and what, you know, existential like artifacts
yeah.
exist from that.
Mhm.
So yeah, I think he created a lot of things. A lot of the palettes in the visuals are like literally my flesh and hair, just like manipulated. So it's like very alive and
Mhm.
really weird. I love it. It's really cool.
Yeah, that actually brings us back to the full circle with you said availabilism, was it?
Yeah,
Yeah,
available.
because you were right there and you were part of the medium.
Yeah, and I
Yeah,
had the footage. I was like, here you go.
there you go. That's awesome. Let's talk gear. What would you say is the most essential piece of gear to the particular sound of Patience?
Hmm. So there's like a what do you call it? Like a pedal chain, I think, that I actually created within the DAW.
Hmm.
But the pedal chain is actually where I sort of like with commercial success in a lot of the songs, that's where I really started using like a similar pedal chain that created this sort of like natural looping. Um, and this like natural looping that sort of like doesn't dissipate and kind of like builds on itself and distorts and then sort of disintegrates because of the distortion. So I think that was probably the most critical because that takes a lot of the songs on the journey that they go on. You know, they have this like I've been obsessed since I was like a teenager and I first heard like some Radiohead songs where there was this thing that I would call like the voice that goes on forever.
Hmm.
Um, I think a really clear example is the Rip by Portishead. She sort of like hits this note and then it's looped in a way with a synth and it just
Oh,
like
yes. I know exactly what part of that song you're talking about. It's
yeah,
kind of like the chaos pad sound, maybe. I'm not exactly sure if
right.
she used the chaos pad, but yeah.
There's a lot of ways you can, you
Hmm.
know, mimic that. And I've seen a performance where it seems like they're just using a synth and I'm like, it really sounds like her voice, guys. Um, but yeah, I really was obsessed with that concept. So trying to create something like that that's maybe a little uglier and like a little grainier, I think is was like the essential thing.
Yeah, that's cool. And so, for the last question, if you were stranded on a desert island and could only take three pieces of gear with you, what would they be and why?
Desert Island. Well, do I get to ask a follow-up question?
Yes.
Is there electricity?
You can find a way. People make alarm clocks with potatoes. I'm sure there's a way. Let's assume yes.
Okay. I mean, something that's always been cute for me is like acoustic guitar. I
hmm
am not a guitarist. I, in fact, hate playing the guitar. It hurts. Don't like it. The finger,
hmm
it's like the piano is so nice and natural and seems like you were meant to play it. The guitar hurts,
Yeah.
but I'd probably bring an acoustic guitar because when I've had like my gear be broken, the guitar just does it. You know, you can
hmm
just make the sounds. So probably an acoustic guitar, maybe an acoustic piano, even though that would like only sound good for a year or so, you know? And what else? Oh, tape recorder,
I was just gonna say that. I had an inkling you would say
batteries.
tape recorder.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's a chapter in Genesis Peorage's book where she says, or it's like the chapter is called "A Tape Recorder is a Weapon."
hmm
Um, I think that is very true.
I am curious if the song title Blank Tape has anything to do with that, just randomly.
So blank tape was more sort of, I think the concept is, you know, if we're thinking about like the human, like consciousness or soul or whatever being copied,
hmm
I'm thinking of sort of, what if you do that and it's blank or it's ruined
Mm.
or it's
hmm
just like, or compromised in some way. So I think that was, and that also came from just a feeling of feeling pretty empty. So it was like, I'm serving nothing right now.
Thank you. Thanks so much for chatting with me. It's been
Thank
interesting
you.
to see this album through multiple perspectives, both the interviewer's perspective as well as the audience's live perspective, as well as the listener's perspective, just with the tape copy. So that's been really great. Thank you.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.